First, let me say that I am very happy that you have decided to take this course. The aim of this course is to provide you with the essential knowledge and skill set required to become a very successful threat hunting professional. Just to set the expectations, the course is primarily for persons who want to get started in threat hunting. However, seasoned professionals can also use this course as a refresher. A major portion of this course will be theoretical, as this is required to lay a solid foundation for successful threat hunting. However, there will be a small demo session, and most importantly is that I will be providing you with lots of resources that will aid you tremendously in putting the information received into developing practical threat hunting skills. Now, with that said, let me outline for you the areas that will be covered in this course. Now, in section 1, we'll be covering all the essentials of threat hunting. And in this section, we'll be looking at things, for example, the threat hunting requirements, the threat hunting loop, what is required for threat hunting, the various threat hunting approaches. In section 2, we look at the threat hunting scenarios and how you go about analyzing or dealing with a threat hunting case. In section 3, we look at the next steps and also an intro to advanced threat hunting, and then we will go into the conclusion of our course. So I'm very excited to unpack the wonderful information, and I'll also look forward to see you in the next section when we get things rolling with the essentials of threat hunting. See you then. Now that we have laid the foundation for our course, let us jump right in to get a good understanding of what threat hunting is and also its primary objective. Threat hunting is a human-led, proactively focused cyber defense activity. In essence, it's the practice of proactively going after cyber threats rather than waiting for an alert to start investigation and remediation. The more quickly that a threat is identified and remediated in the cyber attack lifecycle, and we are going to be looking at our cyber attack lifecycle in details, the less damage that it can do to the organization. A proactive approach like threat hunting is often more difficult than a purely reactive cybersecurity strategy. So in essence, threat hunting is just being proactive. So you're not waiting for something to happen in your network, but rather you're looking for those signs, those indications of compromise that we'll be looking at to identify where possible breaches or threats are taking place within your network instead of waiting for something to trigger an alert to tell you that a threat is actually happening. Now, the primary objective of threat hunting is to intercept potential attacks before damage is done or to mitigate damage of an attack in progress. Now, threat hunting is particularly needed in battling advanced persistent threats, APTs, and we are going to be looking at that as well in details. That start with an initial undetected compromise and then build out long-term multi-phase attacks from there. And the SolarWinds compromise that was revealed in 2020 is a famous example of an APT that you possibly might have heard of before. Now, in our next section, we're going to be spending some time to look at why we do threat hunting. See you then when we'll explore in details. Okay, so now that we know what threat hunting is all about and its primary objective, let us clearly hear by removing all misconceptions about threat hunting. What threat hunting is not. So, threat hunting is not about managing SOC alerts, and SOC stands for Software Operations Center, and that's where a lot of cybersecurity analysts will work as a part of our team, and possibly you might also be a part of a SOC team if you decide to. So it's not managing security or SOC alerts. Threat hunting is not about checking logs for suspicious activities. It's also not about checking dashboards for unusual activity. Neither is it monitoring and responding to EDRs, and EDRs stand for Endpoint Detection and Response Alerts. These are all reactive activities. Threat hunting, as I'd mentioned earlier, is a proactive process, not a reactive process. Now, we are going to be looking further at why we threat hunt. So, see you in the next section where we'll dive into the details. In our previous video, we look at what threat hunting is not. So with that knowledge, let us now look at why we threat hunt. And one of the main reasons was explained earlier, to be proactive. But threat hunting does provide a lot of advantage in terms of making our environment safe and mitigating threats to the organization. Now, the difficulty of threat hunting may put off many security teams. Doing it right requires a knowledgeable security team supported by the right tools and access to the right data. Putting this together can be difficult. However, a good threat hunt provides several advantages, namely proactivity, retrospective, and wide field of view. Now, what do we mean by proactive? With threat hunting, it is possible to identify and remediate a potential threat early in the attack lifecycle. This decreases the ability of the attacker to do damage or steal sensitive data. As a result, a successful threat hunt could save an organization millions in avoided data breach cost. Now, retrospective. Ideally, an organization's cybersecurity deployment will identify every successful intrusion on the network. In reality, the increased sophistication of cyber threat actors means that some attacks will slip by unannounced. By performing threat hunts on historical data, it is possible to identify previously missed intrusions and take appropriate actions. Wide field of view. Now, an alert-driven incident response strategy is limited to the data available in security alerts. With threat hunting, a security team can investigate potential threats that may not be detectable using the available data in the alerts. Threat hunting has significant benefits, but can also be difficult to perform effectively. Before starting threat hunting, it is important to evaluate whether your organization's security team has the ability to threat hunt effectively. If this is not the case, and threat hunting would be a value to your organization. And this is where you now develop those skills as a threat hunter to aid your organization in capitalizing on these benefits that threat hunting can provide in helping the organization to be safe or to be cyber resilient. Now, With that said, we are going to be looking at the attributes of an effective threat hunter. Now, to be a very effective threat hunter, then you have to be very patient. It requires a lot of time, a lot of dedication, paying attention to details, a lot of the information, what is required to identify these indications or indicators of compromise will be in the fine print. You have to be very analytical in the way you organize and process information. And very importantly, you also have to be someone who thinks outside of the box. Be willing to put in a lot of hours. Very time consuming. But at the end of the day, it's very rewarding when you are able to prevent or to mitigate against an attack that could cause your organization millions of dollars and also could put that organization out of business, which in turn would affect you as an employee. Now, in the next section, we'll be looking at threat hunting requirements, and I'll be going in further details as to the skill set that is required to become a very successful threat hunter. See you then. Okay, welcome to this section. Now that we have a understanding of the attributes of an effective threat hunter, now let us look at the requirements, the skill set that a threat hunter should possess if he or she wants to be very proficient, very equipped and knowledgeable in this area of cybersecurity. So, threat hunting requires a wide range of skills, and these listed are some of the critical ones, and it's not limited only to these skills. However, cybersecurity experience, and you might be saying that I am new to this field. However, it's a starting point whereby you can actually start building your experience. So having the knowledge is very important. As you go along in your cybersecurity career, then you will definitely start putting this information into better perspective. So cybersecurity experience, knowledge of network and endpoint security, data analysis, intelligence analysis, forensic science, malware reverse engineering, understanding of attack methods. This includes past and current attack methodologies and trends in general, and the tactics, techniques, and procedures (TTPs) associated with specific attackers or hacker groups. Knowledge of operating systems and network protocols. These should include good Windows and Linux skills as well as deep knowledge of TCP/IP. Programming skills. At least one scripting language and compiled languages such as C or C++. And hunters also need to know how to automate tasks, parse logs, and carry out data analysis tasks. Many security experts say the best way to train as a threat hunter is simply to start hunting, gaining skills and confidence as you go along. And I'm in total agreement. However, this course pretty much laid the foundation for you to start diving in. As in with anything else, you can't dive into something without having at least prior knowledge of the basics of what it is that you're dealing with. And as you go along, then you will advance and enhance your skills and abilities to carry out the task effectively. So as mentioned at the beginning of this course, I will definitely be providing you with lots of resources and a path to get your hands dirty in your practical threat hunting journey. Now, with that said, in our next section, we'll be looking at terms associated with threat hunting. See you then. Now, in this section, we're going to be looking at terms associated with threat hunting. And it's very important that we get a good understanding of these terms because these are uh, terms that you will come across from time to time when doing threat hunting. And there could also be a number of others, but these are some of the most common ones, terms that you will come across and terms that I'll be using from time to time in this course. So the anomaly. So an anomaly is normally unusual behavior by a person or device. Not all anomalies are malicious, but all malicious activity is anomalous. DLP, that's data loss prevention, both a technique and technology type undertaken to keep malicious insiders or hackers from leaking or stealing confidential information. Now, DLP products normally scan or are designed to scan emails, files, and other assets as they move through the network. In this way, they are able to determine if any given assets contain confidential information, and if so, block them. Now, indicators of compromise, IOCs, an indicator that provides high confidence of malicious activity. The challenge is that IOCs are static. For example, advanced persistent threat APT groups use specific malware. Once it's discovered, they modify their malware so as to continue to remain unknown. IOC examples can include hashes, IP addresses, domains, URLs, email addresses, and other assets. Now, incident response. An organization approach to receiving, reviewing, and responding to cybersecurity breach, an insider threat, otherwise known as malicious insider. Now, this is where you have a person, normally an employee, who is using their access permissions to steal confidential information. It's often difficult to detect such behavior until it's too late. TTPs stands for tactics, techniques, and procedures. And this is a threat actor's behavior. A tactic is the highest level description, while techniques provide a more detailed contextual description of the behavior. A procedure is a low level, highly detailed methodology in the context of a given technique. A threat hunter is a cybersecurity professional who sufficiently understands the enterprise to be able to identify anomalous network behavior. For example, a threat hunter might identify a large amount of traffic to, for example, the AWS cloud platform, but knows that the organization doesn't have an authorized presence with that cloud provider. Threat hunters leverage the MITRE ATT&CK framework in their hunt for TTPs. And the MITRE ATT&CK framework is one that I highly recommend that you take some time to research. It's a framework that is used to simulate or create hypotheses in terms of identifying breaches and how breaches can take place within a network. So I highly recommend that you actually take some time to explore the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Now, threat intelligence. Information relevant to protecting an organization from internal and external cyber threats. Threat intelligence also includes the process, policies, and technology used to gather and analyze that information. The focus around threat intelligence includes sharing IOCs, which we mentioned, indicators of compromise, and contextual information of adversaries with partner organizations. SIEM stands for Security Information and Event Management. Now, this is technology that supports threat detection, analytics, and incident response through the collection and correlation of security events from a number of data sources. SIEMs correlate log sources to identify potentially malicious activity and generates alerts for security analysts like yourself to investigate. So these are very important terms associated with threat hunting that you should have an understanding of. Now, in the next section, we'll be looking at the threat hunting loop, very critical component of threat hunting. See you in that section. In this section, we'll be looking at the threat hunting loop. Now, threat hunting is based off the scientific method. To perform a threat hunt, all that a threat hunter has to do is to evaluate and test a hypothesis. The main challenge in threat hunting is developing hypotheses that are easily testable and that once tested provide useful information. Now, the first thing that you want to do as a threat hunting professional as you are carrying out a threat hunt is to choose a target. This stage of the threat hunting process is intended to determine the question that the threat hunt is designed to answer. A good resource for making this decision is the MITRE attack framework, which I mentioned earlier. This describes the phases of a cyber attack and various methods that an attacker can use to accomplish each phase. Selecting one of these tactics and trying to detect it on the network is a good starting point for a threat hunt. I highly recommend taking time to study more about the MITRE attack framework. Now, the second thing that you want to do is to create the hypothesis. In this stage, the threat hunter creates a testable hypothesis that will help to determine if the chosen tactic is being used on the network. These hypotheses should look something like, if X is happening on the network, then it means that Y technique is happening. The MITRE attack matrix is valuable for this as well, since it describes a variety of detection mechanisms for each technique. The third thing in the loop is to collect data. At this point, the threat hunter collects data designed to determine the validity of the hypothesis. The collected data should be able to point to whether or not X is occurring on the network. You would then want to analyze that data that is collected. Most data collected during a threat hunt will likely come in the form of one or more data sets with a large amount of noise. In this stage, the threat hunter sifts through and aggregates the data to find an answer to whether or not X is occurring on the network. And lastly, you want to draw conclusions. Based upon the data collected, it should be possible to prove or disprove the hypothesis and take remediative action if the hypothesis is supported. If the collected data does not answer the question, then the hypothesis can be refined based off the results in order to provide a more useful answer. Now, in the next section, we'll be looking at what is required for successful threat hunting. See you then when we'll discuss this in details. Having gone through the threat hunting loop, I do hope that by this you're seeing where all the pieces of the puzzle are coming together to really understand what is involved in this threat hunting process. And just stick with me as we go through this entire course. Please go to the end and you'll definitely be in for surprises in terms of the resources that are available. Now let us look at what is required for successful threat hunting. So in order for you to be able to conduct a successful hunt, then you definitely need telemetry, you need tools, you need processes. And telemetry, to be able to hunt for threats in your infrastructure, you will need data. That's the key thing. This data comes from hosts and network devices in the form of logs. So that is where your information will be coming from. All the logs that are associated with the various devices, network devices, servers, endpoint devices that are connected within your network. Now with that information, then you will need tools to gather and put that information together in a meaningful format. Your threat hunting platform can utilize scene tools that we mentioned earlier as the underlying technology to collect categories and correlate security events. So scene features allow a quick search through the collected data. It also provides a user-friendly visualization and instant investigation and response. So scene tools makes the information more presentable and also for quick querying of the data that you're looking for. Now, for example, you can build a robust threat hunting platform based on the ELK stack that I'll be introducing you to later in this course. And ELK stack stands for Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. Now you also need processes, and threat hunters use tools and collected telemetry data to proactively search for threats in their environment. However, to ensure the best performance and maximum business value, threat hunting practices should be implemented together with or after the associated processes. And these processes are, for example, threat intelligence and incident response. So you need your telemetry, you need your tools, you need your processes. Now, in order for your threat hunt to be effective, that's the key. You want to have an effective hunt so that you are able to help the organization identify and mitigate whatever underlying threat might exist in that environment. So you need a methodological approach mindset for your hunt to be effective, and you also need imagination and ingenuity, right? Being able to think outside of the box. So effective threat hunting relies on a mindset and a method approach that allows the security analyst in your case to think like a threat actor and then use that understanding to determine what clues to look for that might indicate an attack underway. While experience certainly helps, the ever-changing landscape of threat actors and their sophistication requires the threat hunter to take a disciplined approach that structures a, met- a methodological hunt based on updated TTPs of top global threat actors. Thus, top threat hunters today rely on a repeatable framework that guides the hunter to think through each stage of a potential attack and then determine the evidence to search for. Now, threat hunting demands imagination and ingenuity, thinking outside of the box. At the same time that it asks practitioners to follow iterative, repeatable, and systematic process. While it shares a lot with cyber investigations, threat hunting is a very distinct function. Whereas investigations focus on known crimes that have already occurred, seeking to identify the cause, the perpetrators, and the damage, threat hunting is the heart and science of looking for weak signals in the data to identify potential threats. And that's where your creativity as a threat hunter comes in. This typically entails collecting a set of various indicators that a crime might be in progress and putting them together to form a clear picture of the attack if one is indeed underway. In this way, threat hunting is akin to the role of a CIA analyst. Rather than investigating a crime that occurred, the CIA analyst is focused on gathering intelligence and also about potential threats and interviewing to prevent an attack once it is discovered. So that is what is required in order for you to carry out an effective threat hunt within your organization. Now, in the next section, I'll be introducing you to the threat hunting approaches that you need, right? So there are various approaches that a threat hunter needs to follow in order to carry out an effective threat hunt. So see you in that next section where I will give you the details of the various approaches. See you then. Welcome back to this section, threat hunting approaches. Now, having gathered and trained a team equipped with the necessary tools, telemetry data, and at least somewhat streamlined processes, you are now prepared to start a proactive search for threats in your environment. Today, threat hunters employ several approaches to threat hunting, depending on their expertise, available telemetry, and tools, which I earlier mentioned. To gain a better understanding of the advantages and disadvantages of different approaches, we have to look at the fundamental concept introduced by David J. Bianco in 2013, cleverly dubbed the Pyramid of Pain. It illustrated the breakdown of indicators according to their severity. Now looking at the pyramid, the levels within the pyramid represent different types of indicators of compromise that can be used to detect malicious activity in your environment. The width of each level reflects the number of possible indicators of this type, whilst its color and position show how much hassle or pain, as it is called, may cause an attacker when their indicators are detected and blocked. For instance, blocking IP addresses or C2 domain names will cause minor irritations to an attacker since IP addresses can be easily changed and new domains can be registered. However, blocking specific utilities can cause the attacker much greater inconvenience, as they will have to reinvent their tool or develop or purchase a new one in order to evade this protection, which is rather expensive and annoying. Furthermore, the tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, which I mentioned earlier, employed by an adversary can be identified with the help of detection rules. This will cause greatest pain to the intruder, and they will have to either change their techniques, which may be difficult and even impossible, or simple retreat. Now that you understand the concept behind the pyramid of pain, let us turn our attention to the approaches that are currently applied in threat hunting. Now, these are the approaches that are used in threat hunting: the TTPS based approach, the tools based approach, and the IOC based approach. Now, let us look at these individually. Now, the IOC based approach, the first 4 levels of the pyramid going from the base up, malicious activity is identified through the application of specific indicators. These could be file hashes corresponding to specific hacker tools such as Miami Cats or Empire, if you are familiar with ethical hacking using Kali Linux, or a domain name specific to the hacker's control server. Less volatile indicators would be specific registry keys, change in malware, or user agent strings. Now, tools-based approach, the next level of the pyramid. This approach involves the detection or identifiers associated with specific tools, example, command lines that can be reached from processes, execution events, or attributes of executable files uploaded by EDR solutions such as Sysmon. The TTPS based approach, the top of the pyramid represents tactics, techniques, and procedures. Let us assume that the attacker applies a remote code execution technique to enable lateral movements and get a foothold in the system. An experienced threat hunter will explore this technique and determine what telemetry data they will need to develop a detection rule. Once ready, the threat hunter applies the respective tools to proactively detect the use of this technique in a protected environment. Now, the most advanced threat hunters tend to use the last two approaches, and we are going to be looking shortly as to how this actually works in light of each approach, or it is applied to a case scenario. So in the next section, we'll be looking at hypothesis testing and the sources of hypothesis. See you in the next section. As was previously mentioned, in order to carry out threat hunting, you have to have an hypothesis, and threat hunting is a proactive approach to finding where there is a possibility of an insider threat within your organization instead of waiting for alerts to take place. Now, an hypothesis is a supposition or proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. Now, threat hunting starts with an ideal or an idea and an hypothesis. And ideas can be derived from a number of sources, namely the MITRE ATT&CK matrix, the threat intelligence reports, blogs, for example, Twitter and conference calls, incident response and investigation practices, practicing penetration testing. Now, hypothesis testing is a form of statistical inference that uses data from a sample to draw conclusions about a population parameter or a population probability distribution. Now, one of the main sources is the MITRE ATT&CK matrix, and this is a vast knowledge base of attack tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs. Studying the MITRE techniques and their simulation in test environments can serve as a foundation for the development of hypotheses. Now let me just show you what this MITRE ATT&CK framework actually looks like. So here we have the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and pretty much with this framework you are able to, these are the various phases of an attack. So it shows you how an attack can actually take place, the various techniques that are used within each phase. So based on this framework or this matrix, then you are able to formulate an hypothesis to carry out your threat hunt. So you have your reconnaissance, the resource development, initial access, each of these areas that you can actually look at the various techniques. So as I mentioned before, it's great if you take the time to invest in knowing more about this attack framework or this matrix and how it can be applied to threat hunting. Now, the next hypothesis source is threat intelligence reports. Now, threat intelligence reports contain loads of useful information about attack techniques and procedures based on real incidents. Periodic analysis of such reports should spark some thoughts and give rise to a plethora of threat hunting ideas. Blogs, Twitter, and conference talks. Cybersecurity researchers and experts are eager to share the results of their researches. It is the information about a new attack techniques appears for the first time even before the attack starts. Actively use it. The timely study of such information will allow threat hunters to be proactive and prepare before the new attack techniques become widespread. Incident response and investigation practices. Having gained some hands-on experience in this field, you will have a holistic and in-depth information about the TTPs employed by attackers, all at your disposal. Practicing penetration testing. Attackers tend to use tools similar to those applied by experienced pen testers. Therefore, studying pen testing practices create a treasure trove of knowledge for generating threat hunting hypotheses. If you have an in-house team of penetration testers, it will be worthwhile cooperating with them. This will be a mutually beneficial process. Threat hunters will gain valuable knowledge about the tools and techniques used by attackers, while penetration testers will learn how response teams can detect their activity. Now, in our next section, we are going to get into the fun phase of this course, and that is how we go about walking through an actual hunt. An hunt is done. So see you in the next section, which I know you are anxiously awaiting. See you then. If you reach to this point of this course, I'm super happy for you and congratulations that you have stuck with the course with me to this point in the journey of becoming that professional threat hunting individual that organizations are in demand of. Now, before we actually start looking at how we actually carry out a threat hunt, let us first look at 7 effective threat hunting tips that you as a threat hunter definitely want to bear in mind as you go about carrying out your threat hunting. Now, threat hunting tip number 1 is to look for tunneled communications. What do I mean by that? A good source of adversarial activity to hunt for are indications of command and control. C2. More specifically, look for activity that is trying to emulate normal traffic, such as tunnel communications, where one network protocol is used to carry another. For example, threat actors will embed their communications in DNS traffic because many corporate firewalls permit outbound DNS traffic. Threat hunting tip number 2, identify specific attributes. When you have decided or when you have identified a threat, be sure to research the characteristics of that threat and look for unique attributes such as special URL used. The more specific the attributes you can find, the easier it can be to identify when you sort and filter the dataset later. Threat hunting tip number 3, scope your data. Networks logs, data logs, or even the SIEM are good sources of data for threat hunting, but you must put parameters around the data volume you are going to sift. A week's worth and certainly no more than a month's worth of data is normally great for analysis. The key is to choose data sources that are likely to match the activity for which you are looking. Threat hunting tip number 4, take a wide pass at the data first. It's important to take a high-level pass at filtering the data and avoiding the instinct to immediately investigate in depth the first thing that catches your eye. Instead, use the first pass to bookmark those items that look interesting and then prioritize these when you are finished with the first pass. Hunting tip number 5. Use sorting techniques to narrow your hunt. Sorting is essential to narrowing down the data set and homing in on possible threats. For example, sort the dataset from smallest to largest bytes and then center your efforts on the larger file sizes. And this, for example, when you might have extracted your data from your logs, maybe put them in an Excel sheet and then sorting through. It's a simple process. Another technique is to sort by HTTP methods. For example, put is an HTTP method available that is not commonly used for web traffic, which makes it a good tip for sorting threat hunting data. Importantly, sorting also includes visualization. Visualization techniques can greatly aid into spotting communication patterns and irregularities that merit investigation. Hunting tip number 6, filter out known good. Once you have taken an initial pass at the dataset, you're in a better position to filter out known good. Known good is network traffic to and from sources and destinations and can rule out as normal communications. The caveat here is you don't want to make assumptions that cause you to exclude traffic worth a closer look. Trend hunting tip number 7. Look for service oddities. Now, service oddities are network anomalies. And network anomalies are, for example, a port or protocol being used in a way that is rare or unusual. For example, port 443 is typically used for TLS SSL traffic. Therefore, HTTP traffic on port 443 or SSL traffic that is not on that port are prime examples of service oddities. Strengthen your overall cybersecurity defense. Since you're hunting for adversarial activity, the process of threat hunting will give you the chance to examine your IT environment from the perspective of a threat actor. You may not always find a threat over the course of your hunts, but you will almost assuredly find misconfigurations, network anomalies, and potential weaknesses by virtue of the exercise. The knowledge gleaned through threat hunting holds value because you can use it to strengthen your overall cybersecurity defense or defenses. Now, in the next section, we're going to be looking at the case-based theoretical hunting. So, see you in that section. So, here we are in our threat hunting section, one of the most interesting section of our course. This is where we actually put into perspective what we have been learning to this point. Now, in this case-based threat hunting section, I will be going through just a theoretical walkthrough of how you would actually create an hypothesis, or you would actually, or a threat would be simulated, for example, on paper before you actually go in an actual environment to configure your various applications to carry out an actual threat hunt. So it's always good to have a good theoretical understanding of what it is that you're doing or what is it that you're about to do before you actually go in that real environment. So let me quickly bring up that information for you. Okay, and I will be providing you with links to all of these resources that you can further do your investigation, do more thorough reading to better appreciate this course in its entirety. Now, just to get an understanding of what it is that you will be doing. So in this section, it's pretty much, I will not be going through all the details, but just to give you an idea of what is happening. Now, for this particular threat hunting situation, they are basically using Windows OS audit events and the sysman utility from sys internal suite. They'll also be using Elastic stack-based threat hunting platform to capture and store and visualize as well as to analyze the information. And I will be also providing you with all the links, resources further in the course that you'll be using to create your own environment, doing all the setups. So here they have the incident description. All the details are outlined in the incident description as to what they are hunting, the scenario, what happens, and this is the diagram that outlines all the various phases of that incident. So here we have our attacker who sends a phishing email, and the user clicks on that link, and a payload is then sent back. Is then downloaded on the user's machine that acts as a backdoor, then creates a C2 command and control connection back to the attacker, who then carries out his pivoting inside that network. And then you have your hypothesis being created, and then you as the threat hunter will now use the various threat hunting approaches to go about investigating or simulating the various attack scenarios or hypotheses that we will be testing for, looking at the various ways in which an attack could actually take place within your organization. So we have the hypothesis, we have the various IOC that we looked at, the IOC based hunting, then it goes down to your tool based hunting, and all the logs and the information, all the querying that was done from the logs that were captured in Kibana. Then it then goes down to the TTPS based threat hunting, and then you look at the various hypotheses that they tested for. Hypothesis 1, it looked at an office application process as connected to a malicious host, and then look at all the various things that could happen in that situation. 2, an office application has created an executable file and what happens in that scenario. And then 3, it looks at an office application has executed a command and control interpreter and what happens within that particular situation. And I'll be providing you with a link so you can actually go through this in details, reading, to get a better appreciation of all the details that are there, so that when you're actually going in your own environment to do your necessary configurations, so this is at an high level of what is actually involved. And all threat hunters approach it differently. They have the various configuration environments, so no two environments are the same. Depends on who. It's all about the approach and the mindset where you go about creating your hypothesis and where you go about testing the various scenarios. So this has it nice laid out for you that you can actually go through all of this in detail. Now, let us quickly look at a number of threat hunting products that are widely used in the market and that you can also do further investigations on. Carbon Block, formerly Bit9, we have CrowdStrike, Cyber Reason, Dark Trace, which is well known in the industry, Endgame, Extra App Network, we have SQRRL, pronounced Squirrel, now owned by Amazon, and also Victra. And I also have a few other tools, surprise tools, that I'll also introduce to you that you will be using to set up and configure your own practice lab as I go further down in this course. So please stick with me as we go along. Now, in this section, we'll be looking at developing your threat hunting skills. So see you in this section where I will further go through the details of this. So see you then. Thank you. In this section, we are going to be looking at basic threat hunting techniques that you can use to start your threat hunting journey. Simple practices that you can use on your own personal computer, and then you can also transfer this knowledge, very useful techniques and knowledge, in your organization. Now, one of the key things about threat hunting, apart from all the information that I've shared with you earlier in terms of the various approaches that you can use, the key thing is knowing what to look for and where to look. Those are the key things. What is it that you're looking for and where to look? And at times this is not obvious. However, once you have a basis on which to work from, then you put yourself in a far better position to be proactive rather than waiting for something to happen. Now, let us quickly look at some of the key indicators of compromise to monitor within your network, or some of the things that can actually give you an idea that something that is not right is actually happening in the network. Something suspicious is taking place. Now, this list is not exhaustive, but some of the basic things. Unusual outbound network traffic. And this normally indicates a lot of information, a lot of traffic, data is leaving the network. So that is something that you would want to look out for. Anomalies in privileged user account activity. Geographical irregularities. Other login red flags. A lot of times within networks, these are things that are normally configured on the firewall, on the intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention systems. Swells in database, read volume, HTML responses, depending on whether or not you're running web applications, and you have large number of requests for the same file, mismatch port application traffic, suspicious registrar, system file changes, DNS requests anomalies, unexpected patching of systems, mobile device profile changes, bundles of data in the wrong places, web traffic with unhuman behavior, signs of DDoS activities. Now, all of these things at times require special skills, special tools, special skill set, experience to actually diagnose and troubleshoot all these issues. However, there is always a starting point that you can work from. And that is what I'll be introducing you to start your threat hunting journey. Now, basic threat hunting using your Windows Security Log and Task Manager. Now, these are two very powerful services or tools built into Windows that you can highly capitalize, that can definitely give you some insights as to what is happening within your network. Now, for example, in this case, if you should go to your task manager just to explore your task manager. Let me just quickly bring my task manager up. Now, your task manager tells a lot of story. It gives a lot of details, a lot of information as to what is happening on your system. Now, depending on the baselines that you have configured in terms of what is acceptable traffic, what applications should be running within your network on your server, then you are able to then monitor anything that is out of the ordinary. For example, CPU usage, memory usage, network utilization, all these things, the performance of your server, for example, the spikes, this usage, all these components are able to give you an idea as to what is happening. For example, connecting to your firewall, analyzing the logs, looking at CPU utilization, inbound and outbound traffic. These are very good starting points to start looking at whether or not the activities taking place on a critical server or end user is actually normal. And that is somewhere that you could actually start looking from in terms of seeing whether or not any form of compromise is happening within your network. Now, very powerful tool on all applications, and one of the things that come with most network applications is a login application, a login system, a login mechanism. And the Windows Event Viewer is a very powerful login mechanism. Now, one of the things about Windows is event log is that it captures a lot of detail. So you have to know what it is that you're looking for. Now, I am going to be showing you quickly some of those key things that you need to be looking for as it relates to your event viewer. Let me quickly bring up that event viewer. And there we have our event viewer. And from there we have our Windows logs, application security logs. We have setup logs, our system logs. And these logs tell a lot of story as to all that is happening on your server, on your critical systems. And all of this information can be connected to your scene tools. That, for example, Splunk, you have Kibana, all of those applications that you can then use to query the data to configure special alerts. But even before you even reach to those points, then it's just to have an understanding of what it is that we are looking for. So from here you are able to search your event logs as to what it is that you're looking for. So we have identified where to look, and secondly we want to know what it is that we are looking for. Now let me quickly from this diagram, and I will also be providing you with this resource that you will be able to drill down in detail for further understanding. But here we have our threat hunting with just using our security log. Is a very powerful tool that can be used for carrying out our threat hunting exercise. So for example, in this case, you can identify where we have failed logins. That's normally these are the areas that you want to be looking at in terms of indications of compromise or unsuspicious activities. These are areas that tells you that something suspicious is happening within my network. Failed logins, Kerberos authentications, attempt made to set DRSM passwords, SIDs, event IDs, event log cleared. Now, if you notice in this event ID it says 1102, why would somebody want to clear an event log? It's an indication that something suspicious is happening. Let us look at my server on my event log to see if we can find this event. So event 1102. So from search 1102, and you go to find. Alright, and 1102 event ID, there's no 1102. So I do not have that activity. Let me see what other activity, what other event ID that we could look for. What about fail logins? Alright, fail logins, that's 4625. Let's look for 4625. 4625. I'm not seeing a 4625, so it simply means that I have been very consistent in logging in correctly. So that's a very simple yet very effective way that we can go about carrying out basic threat hunting. And this document, as I said before, is a very powerful mind map that was created that makes threat hunting very easy. So from here it has all the details, potential recon that is happening. These are IDs, a user's local group, so you can actually do a search or a threat hunt on your event log, on your system log, connecting to your servers, and you are able to pull and identify a number of valuable information to see whether or not any suspicious activity, any data exfiltration is happening on your network. So in the next section, I will be introducing the various environments and tools platforms that you will be using to configure your environment to execute your threat hunt and then take your experience and your skill set to the next level. See you in that section. Okay, I am super excited and happy for you if you stuck with the course to this point. Now, this is the part that is really amazing, the part that I've been waiting for a long time to introduce you to. Now, section 4, next steps. Now, having gone through all this information, then it's now time to put your skills to use, whereby you will be creating your environment, doing your setups, and start getting your hands dirty. Alright, so let me just quickly jump into the resources that I have in store for you, and I'll be attaching this to your course that you can actually start implementing these solutions, environments. Now I've actually structured all of this information nicely for you, and if you recognize that we have threat hunting in action, and from here you're able to go to that link and see the very first demo that we did in our walkthrough session. And from here we have intro to network hunting, and this is a video that actually gives you a very detailed perspective on how you go about doing network threat hunting. Now I have also provided you resources, let me just bring you to this site, a very great site, a site that I also do my training and practice from my own advanced threat hunting development. And as I said before, this course is pretty much to lay your foundation and to guide you into those avenues to start building on your skill. So let me just quickly jump to this website here just to show you what is in store for you. Now on this website you are able to, this is your lab environment. So from here it's called the threat hunting training. You can also register. Once labs are available and classes are available, you could register, and you also have access to all of the slides, labs, lab downloads, all the environment, all the course slides are there. The lab downloads, all the virtual machines, the environment, login information, and pretty much how you go about getting up and running to create those lab scenarios for your threat hunting class. Lab details, all the lab notes, all the necessary recordings are also there that goes in detail for this threat hunting session that has been done. Very great environment. Now one of the things also in addition to that is the number of free tools for threat hunting that you can use. So from here, if you click on free tools, just waiting for this site to load. So there we have it. We have all the free tools available to your disposal. Right, this is active defense. You have Beaker, you have eSpy, you have Pastor, you have Rita, very powerful application. And you have a threat simulator. Alright, so you can actually go through, start experimenting with all of these tools, and also explore the site to get further details as to how you go about using all of these applications, environments, the labs to get your threat hunting um, career off the ground, up and running. And for even those who are already in the field, this is also an opportunity to sharpen your skills as you go along. Um, this tutorial that I have here will definitely show you how to create your own scene tool for with Elasticsearch, with Kibana. So there are two sets of videos here that you can actually, these links will definitely show you how to create those scene tool environments to start examining various log files coming from various devices within your environment. As I said before, there are many tools, resources that can be used for ingesting logs that can be processed for investigation. So here we have Azure Sentinel, and these links will definitely provide you with the resources as well as videos where you go about configuring, start pushing logs from your personal computer to the cloud for analysis for threat hunting purposes. We also have threat hunting based on open source tools. Let me quickly go to this link here just to show you what is in store for you. So from this site, you're able to, and you can also navigate through the entire slide deck to get further details as it explains about Kibana and all of those resources that are there for you to practice. So you have all your labs, the virtual machine files, all the details are there for you to set up your lab environment to start practice your threat hunting skills from there. Also, you have configuring your own hunting environment with Elastic, Logstash, and Kibana, the ALK. Alright, let me just quickly go to this GitHub repository to show you what's there. So from here you have all the instructions, right? The hunting ALK, or simply the ALK, is one of the first common source open source platform with advanced analytics capabilities such as SQL declarative language. So it gives you a total environment that you can actually configure with all the descriptions, all the details, goals, right? The introduction, all the installation steps are there. And this is one of the platforms that are used by many organizations, that they customize it, they design their own interfaces and actually configure, build on top of this architecture. So there you have a number of resources that you can use at your disposal to build on the theoretical knowledge that I've just provided you with. So I will see you in the last section of this course, just to wrap up and also to recap what we have done to this point. See you then. Let us quickly recap what we have just learned in this course. And we have reached the end of this course, and I definitely hope that you have learned something valuable from all the information that has been presented, but most importantly is that you would have developed the mindset, you would have understood the various approaches, the skills that are required, and most important is the fact that you now have to take this further in doing the necessary research and start practicing, putting all of this information into practice. Now let us quickly recap. So we look at what is threat hunting and its primary objective. We looked at what threat hunting is not. We look at why we threat hunt, the attributes of an effective threat hunter, and what is required: patience, keen attention to details, being analytical, a think outside of the box. We also look at the various threat hunting skill set and requirements that you need to have and need to also develop to become very successful and very skilled at being a threat hunter. We look at various terms associated with threat hunting. We look at, very importantly, the threat hunting loop or life cycle, what is required for successful threat hunting. We look at what makes threat hunting effective. We also look at the threat hunting approaches, the pyramid of pain, the TTPS based approach, the tools based approach, the IOC based approach. We look at the various hypothesis testing and sources of hypothesis. We also look at the MITRE ATT matrix, threat intelligence reports, all of these sources that you gather your hypothesis information from. The various threat hunting tips to be very effective as a threat hunter. We also went through our case-based walkthrough, and I've also provided that information in the resources that you can go through that in details. We look at the various threat hunting products. We also look at the various indicators of threat attacks that you need to be familiar with as a threat hunter. We went through just the basic log analysis, looking for those indicators of compromise by looking at those event IDs, and also look at our event viewer to notice those various things, anomalies that you can identify by just looking at your task manager. And I've also gone through the various links or websites that you can now start configuring your labs, putting together all of this information in a practical manner. It was my pleasure sharing this course with you, and I definitely trust that you will take your career further in building on all this information that you have just invested your time in, and I hope it was worth your while. See you in a future course. Let us quickly recap what we have just learned in this course. And we have reached the end of this course, and I definitely hope that you have learned something valuable from all the information that has been presented, but most importantly is that you would have developed the mindset, you would have understood the various approaches, the skills that are required, and most important is the fact that you now have to take this further in doing the necessary research and start practicing, putting all of this information into practice. Now let us quickly recap. So we look at what is threat hunting and its primary objective. We looked at what threat hunting is not. We look at why we threat hunt, the attributes of an effective threat hunter, and what is required: patience, keen attention to details, being analytical, a think outside of the box. We also look at the various threat hunting skill set and requirements that you need to have and need to also develop to become very successful and very skilled at being a threat hunter. We look at the various terms associated with threat hunting. We look at, very importantly, the threat hunting loop or life cycle. What is required for successful threat hunting. We look at what makes threat hunting effective. We also look at the threat hunting approaches, the pyramid of pain, the TTPS-based approach, the tools-based approach, the IOC-based approach. We look at the various hypothesis testing and sources of hypothesis. We also look at the MITRE ATT matrix, threat intelligence reports, all of these sources that you gather your hypothesis information from. The various threat hunting tips to be very effective as a threat hunter. We also went through our case-based walkthrough, and I've also provided that information in the resources that you can go through that in details. We look at the various threat hunting products. We also look at the various indicators of threat attacks that you need to be familiar with as a threat hunter. We went through just the basic log analysis, looking for those indicators of compromise, but looking at those event IDs, and also look at our event viewer to notice those various things, anomalies that you can identify by just looking at your task manager. And I've also gone through the various links or websites that you can now start configuring your labs, putting together all of this information in a practical manner. It was my pleasure sharing this course with you, and I definitely trust that you will take your career further in building on all this information that you have just invested your time in, and I hope it was worth your while. See you in a future course.
Hello, I'd like to welcome everybody to Bricada's continuing webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about network threat hunting. And I'm very pleased to present Tim Crothers, who's going to be taking you through this today. Saying that Tim wrote the book on cybersecurity is probably an understatement. He's a published author of about 15 different books on the topic, and does a series of training and other speaking events throughout the country. So Tim has a combined 20 years of experience running information security programs at large and complex incident response teams, breach investigations, and threat and vulnerability assessments. So we're really lucky to have him here to talk about this subject. Without further ado, I'd like to hand you off to Tim. But before that, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping first. During the course of this course of the webinar, feel free to go ahead and type in any questions that you have in the Q&A section of our user interface. We will be reviewing those as we go along. When we have an opportunity to, we'll either, at the end of this session, we'll go ahead and read those questions off to Tim. We will get back to every question that gets answered, and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the conclusion of this webinar. So thank you very much, and I'm going to hand this off to Tim.
Great, thank you so much, Drews, and thanks for everybody for attending. Thanks for those really gracious introductions. I think I want to go attend that webinar rather than this one, perhaps. So what we want to talk about today is threat hunting, and with threat hunting, I thought it important to start with a view of what I mean when I say threat hunting. The reason I feel this is kind of an important foundation for us is just so that we're on the same page. Like many terms in our space in cybersecurity, it's used in many different ways. And so in this instance, we're going to be talking about a particular aspect of threat hunting. Now, this does not mean that this is the right definition or the only definition or anything like that by any means, just simply the definition that we'll be using for today's piece. So the first component of this is looking for indications of malicious activity, which aren't being detected already, right? Most of us in our environments have some sort of static detection, which uses a series of signatures and rules and things like that in order to find malicious activity. The cyber criminals we're most concerned about really, really well understand what we do to detect on a static perspective and have become quite adept at evading those. And it's not to say, of course, that those aren't incredibly valuable. Those are a fundamental foundation of what we do. Simply that's not going to get us all of the criminals, and particularly concerning, doesn't tend to find the criminals that are the ones most likely to cause us harm. So hunting then becomes a method whereby we can go find unknown malicious activity which might exist in our environment and isn't being detected currently. There's a lot of additional benefits, though, to threat hunting that I think we're spending just a few moments on. First and foremost, it also really increases our understanding of the environment. The biggest, shall we say, learning curve when we start threat hunting in an environment, and frankly so daunting in some cases that many people get frustrated and turn back, and hopefully I can share some ways to get past some of these hurdles in this session today. But the environment you work in and I work in and all of us is absolutely unique. It's a combination, while it's all built on the same protocols, the combination of the specific programs running in our environment, what we do as an organization, all of that comes together to mean that if I pull up a packet capture like a Wireshark or something like that, the actual packets I see in one organization are very different from the other. And initially, as you start digging in, as we're going to walk through here today, you'll find a bunch of things where you go, oh, this is really anomalous. Well, it'll turn out it's legitimate, but maybe it's a misconfigured server, or it's just an odd way that a particular application has of doing things. A good example of that would be Symantec's antivirus platform tunnels DNS to get a lot of their updates, and they do that so that they can get past some inadvertent firewall blocks. But initially, if you're not familiar with that specific behavior, you'll look in your environment and see this and see activity all and have a moment of panic, and then you dig in and realize it's simply Symantec's antivirus. So we have a lot of things like that you're going to dramatically improve your understanding of the environment, which will both make you more successful in hunting as well as more successful in just defending your environment. And then another real benefit is learning to identify those interesting anomalies in the environment. The anomalies, again, are going to be pretty unique from environment to environment. Certainly there's some commonalities, but most of them are a combination of things. And I would stress also, while I don't have it on the slide, just the benefit of learning to understand the malicious actors better, right? When hopefully as we go through here today, when you look at the activity and you realize how it's working, you've not only gained that knowledge, but you've gained some additional insight into the adversaries. And I would say that without fail, the consistent thing I see that really successful cyber hunters bring to the table is it's largely predicated upon their understanding of the environment and their understanding of the adversaries and how they act. So that's what threat hunting is. Now, why in the world would we want to do threat hunting? Well, of course, the obvious one is to find that unknown malicious activity. However, while that is an important goal, again, there's a lot of benefits to threat hunting, which is why I'm such a proponent of it, beyond just the finding the malicious. It also gives us a vehicle for improving our static detection. So I mentioned earlier, right, that most of us have static detection that we leverage. And of course, we tend to leverage signature sets from a lot of different sources and organizations, a lot of different IOCs that we get. But the adversaries are people just like we are, and their goal is to evade those. And so they're constantly changing. And what we learn, so we're going to give some specific examples here today of some concrete things that hopefully you can take and go out and hunt.
Waved your magic wand.
And the go out and hunt, and you'll find some results of those. Well, one of the things you want to consider is a lot of these can then be turned into static detection. And so if you have a loop where you go out and hunt the environment, you take the results of that hunt and use that to build and improve your detection, then it becomes a really incredibly valuable improvement capability for your overall detection and operations. And third and not least, which is I have found it consistently that threat hunting is just a great vehicle for growing our cyber talent. All of us, of course, struggle with finding good, strong talent, and especially pairing in my particular organization, our weekly cyber hunts have a level 3 analyst, a level 2, and a level 1 analyst. Less because the level 3 needs the help of the level 2 and level 1, but because it's a fantastic mentoring opportunity to help turn our level 1, level 2 analysts into those level 3 analysts. So those are really what I see as the primary benefits of threat hunting. Let's get into the meat of course, of our focus today, and how do we go about doing that? It's actually fairly straightforward. The first step that I would suggest is to start with a specific adversarial activity. In particular, the tighter the scope is, the more likely you will be to be successful. One of the easy mistakes to make in starting out with threat hunting is we try and boil the ocean, right? We go, well, I'm going to take this, I'm going to go to Splunk, or I'm going to go to my Bricata system, or I'm going to go to platform X, and I'm going to look for weird stuff. And that's certainly an approach, but because it is not very focused, they mostly tend to be unsuccessful. There's certainly a time and a place for that approach, but especially starting out, I would suggest a better route is to pick something specific, right? So today, for instance, what I'm going to be showing is a couple specific techniques for looking for indications of command and control hiding in our network. I could just as easily, my understanding of cyber criminals, I know that almost always as soon as they've deployed a remote access Trojan on one of my user systems, their next step is often to try and escalate privileges and gain additional access. And so they'll typically use tools to dump the cache credentials, looking for administrative accounts and things like that, right? So that might be another specific attacker activity that I want to go hunt for, right? So that's step one, choose the activity that we want to hunt for. Then we want to determine what's the appropriate data source to support this hunt. This is often where we have to do the most work because it's very common that we don't have all of the components that we need readily accessible to our team members in order to be able to successfully accomplish the hunt. And so figuring that out as an explicit step is really important. So for instance, if I'm looking for instances of Windows cache credentials, I might want to pull prefetch back from my host, or I might want to use the Windows event logs from a large sampling of our hosts. Conversely, in our case today, since we're looking for indications of C2 hiding in the network, then we're going to take advantage of the Bricata sensors running Bro and leverage the Bro logs. In particular, we mostly will be leveraging a log called BroCon, which is short for connection. It's very analogous to NetFlow, and that might be a good alternative source if we don't have Bro in the environment. Maybe we've got NetFlow data that we can pull back in partnership with our network team, for instance. Something that will show the type of information that we're looking for. So that's step 2. Step 3 is really the meat of the work then. So we sift that data source looking for indications of that activity, right? It's often a really valuable step. So if I jump to one of my prior examples, let's say I'm looking for evidence of someone running tools to dump the password cache on our Windows host. Well, but if we partner maybe with our red team or our pen test security testing teams, they can run one of the tools, or even better, a sampling of the tools that are used for those activities, and then I can examine that host. The team can examine that host to see, all right, when we run tool X, what traces does it leave? Which tells us what we might want to go look for. Often in this point, we might and then even identify, oh, well, we actually need some additional data sources in order to hunt this successfully, at which point we go back and we pull some additional data. So don't be afraid of there being an iterative process to this. And so then our goal here, as we look at those indications, we start then diving into those, right? Each of those indications is likely to be something of an anomaly. Could also be legitimate. Run those anomalies to ground. Again, I would suggest that them not being malicious, I would not suggest viewing that as a loss, because even if what you have found is not anomalous, is not malicious in particular, that doesn't mean that you haven't just learned something really useful either about your environment, about something's being done. This is the same reason why I'm less of a fan of pure anomaly detection as a way of finding malicious activity. In most of our environments, we have large amounts of anomalies. You'll find this firsthand if you start hunting, and most of those are for legitimate, albeit often misconfigured reasons. And then it's just literally a matter of rinsing and repeating. So we go back to the source, we've run that initial anomaly to ground, back up to the top level. I like to use the analogy of it's like circling the drain. So as I'm going around and making that pass, I will often, instead of fully investigating the anomaly there at that initial point, I'll tag it. A lot of our tools like Bricata have some really great mechanisms where we can tag things that look interesting. And maybe I want to take a full pass through that set of data and tag the things that look interesting, and then go back and maybe group the things that have been tagged by logical. There's lots and lots of ways to approach this. And honestly, in my experience, one isn't necessarily better than the other. It's a lot about what works for individuals for their kind of flows and methodologies. But by tagging and not necessarily going down every rabbit hole initially, that really also helps, especially if we've got smaller teams that don't have a lot of resources to be able to tackle this problem. So step one, right, we determine what specific activity we want to hunt. Step two, we gather the appropriate data. And then step three is we sift that data looking for the specific indications of that activity. Not rocket science at a high level, right? Like everything, of course, it's really the practice that makes us good at this activity. Another tip I would throw in here at this point is it's also good often time-bound our searches at this point. So we might want to do just 7 days or 30 days, depending on the amount of data. And then tools for helping with that data become very useful at this point. So IPython is very popular, for instance, amongst threat hunters because it allows this combination of a really easy language for quickly parsing and bringing in data and dropping it into data tables, but also then easily visualizing. But frankly, I would just start with Excel in most cases, right? Take your data source, get it in some sort of a parsable format, you know, comma delimited or tab delimited or what have you, read that into Excel, and then again, using just simply sorting and sifting, we can find these. There are going to be times when our best mechanism to start, if we don't have clear, in our case, for instance, where we're going to look for C2s, the outliers are often very interesting to look at. So what are things that are very few? So maybe one of the things I want to look for is really odd user agents, for instance, is often a really fertile hunting ground. And a simple approach there is I would start by sorting based upon frequency, the user agents, and then look at those user agents that are very rare, and go for those. So let's then dig in and go through some specifics of our example for C2 hiding in the network. So with C2 that's hiding in the network, it really boils down to a handful of things that we tend to want to key off of. Most C2, and when I say C2, I mean command and control. So this would be the externally run servers under the control of adversaries, not necessary. Now those remote servers could, of course, be other compromised systems, but systems that are under the control of the adversary, which they use to access our environment, right? All of the adversaries today know that we have firewalls, they can't simply come in, and so the malware reaches out from our environment to connect to a C2 server. They interact with that C2 server, and it becomes their mechanism for interacting both in and out of our environment. So any malware that's running in our environment, which is reaching out to a C2, fundamentally, there's really just two broad ways for them to accomplish it. They either emulate a protocol, so they might pretend to be FTP or pretend to be HTTP while really not being that protocol, or they will tunnel a legitimate protocol. So they might use DNS or HTTP, HTTPS, protocols that they know are allowed in our environment and specifically almost universally allowed to go outside the environment, and they will build their malware so that it communicates using that protocol and then loads its messages into it in some way or another. And so with tunneling and emulating other protocols, inevitably there's, at a high level they look like the protocol, but when you really start digging in deeper and analyzing, you get things like content anomalies. So for instance, the user agent example I gave a little bit earlier, with that situation, what's often happening is they'll be emulating HTTP or HTTPS. And so the backdoor will, they'll often just pick a legitimate user agent from a system, and they hand build the HTTP and then use it to communicate out. But in doing so, it ends up almost inevitably looking different than the legitimate HTTP that's running in our environment. And often this is simply due to human errors, right, where the user agent, for instance, they'll continue to iterate and update the code on their backdoor, but forget that, oh, that user agent string that I'm hard-coding, embedding into this HTTP session that I'm building, I forgot to update it, and it's now 6 months out of date, and so kind of sticks out. Or they'll use a user agent associated with an iPhone or an Android phone or some sort of a tablet, and the malware is actually running on a Windows host. So there's a content anomaly where the user agent isn't actually a valid user agent for that operating system. And so those are just a tip of the iceberg of the types of content anomalies. All of these require you to really, really understand the protocols and how they work, which is why earlier I advocated that it's really useful to spend time hunting specifically to learn the environment and to learn our skills. Then there's also timing irregularities. Because these are programs that are making these connections out, they tend to be very regular. For instance, or at a minimum, not timed the same way as the legitimate protocol is. So maybe, for instance, if I'm, say, tunneling out of DNS, one of the examples we're going to be hunting here in a second is a tool called DNSCat. And what DNSCat does is allows you to create essentially a VPN tunnel outbound over DNS to the command and control server. And that allows us to get data out of the environment without being detected, for instance. But because in that DNSCat instance, because I need that communications to go real time so I can interact with the host, it tends to be timed very, very differently than the way actual DNS requests coming to our hosts happen. And similarly, size irregularities, right? Especially if I'm tunneling another protocol, it's going to cause a series of size differences compared to all of these. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to give you several examples. And so what we did to set this up today was we took a series of tools, PowerShell Empire, DNSCat, things like that, ran them in our lab environment and took the packet captures of those and then replayed those past our Bricata sensor. So since the kind folks at Bricata are sponsoring this, I figured it'd be great to show using hunting using their platform. So this first screenshot we've got up here is just the metadata view in the management console. And this is just a series of packets, right? You can see if you look here, we've got the date time of each packet, what type of protocol, what type of service, the originating IP port, et cetera, right? So this is Brocon log data, and essentially it gives us the source and destination IP port pairs, the amount of traffic, so the size, right? We've got originating bytes and response bytes, several other data points that are helpful. So when I captured this over the weekend when we were working on finalizing all this, and immediately something jumped out at me on this screen. So I'm going to pause for a second here, and what I would ask you to do is take a look at the screen and look for anomalies, and then I'm going to give you a few seconds and then come back and speak to what jumps out at me. Okay, I won't hold overly long, but response port here is port 80, right? Port 80 is HTTP. Yet, if I look across in the third column, notice that the service here is SSL. It is very unusual to run SSL over port 80. Typically, SSL is run on port 443. Now, of course, there's legitimate reasons for exceptions, and so I click into that. So here what I've done is I've clicked on one of those events to bring up the detail, and you can see here that it's got a lot more of the detail of the activity. We've got here particulars around the SSL cert data, right? So we can see that it's a TLS connection using one of the RSA with AES algorithms. Strong, but really unusual to see that on port 80. So, and then of course, depending on the environment, things like the GeoIP being Singapore might or might not be interesting. A lot of organizations, of course, are global, so that's certainly not notable in an organization that does global. But if you're a regional institution, maybe connections from Singapore might be an odd factor. And so what I'm kind of talking through here is essentially the process that we want to follow with hunting, where I've noticed something anomalous. In this case, this is what I would classify as a content anomaly, running SSL over port 80, which, like I said earlier, absolutely does happen for legitimate reasons. So this does not in and of itself tell us that we have something malicious occurring. However, at this point, my spider sense, so to speak, is going off high enough, and hopefully if I've hunted in the environment, I know whether I've got anything that would. So I would often, if this was a real hunt, right underneath the connection ID on the metadata details, I would check that flag button as something I want to come back and look in more detail at. And the way I would go about that process of investigation, by the way, is I would tend to use a lot of filters. So we've got this little filter icon you'll notice on quite a few of the pieces. So I might filter on the originating IP or the response IP or the combination of both, isolate just that traffic, for instance. Filtering is just a hugely powerful tool for helping you in your hunting to really pull out the noise. The biggest deterrent to hunting is all of the legitimate noise and the legitimate activity that we've got to sift through, right? So it's important to call out that the majority of the traffic is not going to be malicious. If we have malicious activity in our environment, it's going to be just a very, very small piece compared to the overall. And it's really setting aside another powerful technique that many people employ in threat hunting, especially at the network layer like this, is I'll use an inverse approach. So I will take that large pile of source data and I will filter out things that I know are legitimate. And coming at it from that direction to see what we end up with is yet another way of approaching this problem. Again, not better, worse, right, wrong. It really depends on the particulars of the situation. So then moving on, I want to switch over to DNS as another example, because my goal here is to give you a few concrete things that you can look for. So from that first one, right, an interesting content anomaly to look for in your environment is SSL over port 80. Would be something that you might consider as a takeaway from our session today. In this case, I've filtered for just DNS traffic. And I've done that because DNS is a very, very popular. So probably the most popular protocols for running malicious activity over tend to be DNS and HTTP, HTTPS. And that's, of course, because the adversaries know that most of our environments, we allow those to traverse out with fairly minimal rules and inspection. And indeed, at a high level, this screen that I've moved to right now looks entirely legitimate. So if you're not familiar, 4221 is one of level 3's public DNS servers. They highly encourage people. They're a great, one of our backbone providers, provide a lot of the bandwidth for the internet. And one of the things they do is they offer 4221, 4222, and 4226 as open, public, anybody can leverage DNS servers. 888 is 8888, sorry, I was missing one 8 there, is Google's DNS, if you're not familiar with that. So again, something potentially, certainly a legitimate DNS server. But again, in looking at this, because I have spent so much time looking at network traffic, both legitimate and malicious, something immediately jumps out to me about the communications. In particular, if we zero in on the 8888, the Google DNS query, the size is unusual. It's not typical to see 14,000 byte responses from DNS. It's certainly possible. It certainly does happen legitimately, but it's atypical, I would say. The other thing, though, the 888 that I have from experience and this is largely due to threat hunting and reverse engineering work over the years, is Google's DNS servers, 8888 in particular, is a common means of malware to validate whether they have internet connectivity or not. So probably the single most ubiquitous thing on the internet is Google. And when malware is firing up, the threat actors know that not 100% of the time do they have the ability to get straight to the internet. But a reliable check for that is a query out to Google's DNS server. And so indeed, again, I'll zero in on that 888 here. I've got a series, so this is a multi-query, so that explains the size. Notice that there's multiple DNS responses being packaged up, and this is literally just a small screenshot of the subset of this, which is a legitimate capability in the DNS protocol. But what's interesting here that kind of jumps out at me is notice the domain name that's being queried here. IKWIESPXKJ PDR.RU. Well, .RU, of course, is TLD, top-level domain for Russia. The first part smells like what we call a DGA, domain-generated algorithm. DGAs are commonly used by malicious software to keep ahead of black hole sinkholing, et cetera. So our proxy servers, right, often have known bad lists, and by constantly generating new domain names like that, it's really unlikely that one of my users typed in that domain name as a query. So taking a look at the host that went to that site that originated that query, probably worth my time at this point. So again, probably a good bet to jump up there and take a deeper look at that. So then looking into one of the other ones, so I picked one of the 4221s to look into. This one doesn't set off any bad signals for me. Specifically, again, it was a fairly long response, but not out of bounds, and looks like legitimate Google ad page stuff. Again, don't be afraid of that, right? This is now new data that is useful to me that just is continuing to further my understanding and experience of the DNS protocols. So in this case, picking again back, notice the answer on this particular one. So I've continued on. Notice this is a different, completely different response IP, 10.200.201.2, which is probably just one of our internal DNS servers, which is often the case, right? If they are trying to traverse out to the internet, they'll count on our DNS servers internally relaying the DNS out, hence the tunneling. Again, notice in the answer section, right there in the middle, right under the two falses on the left-hand side, we've got 117, so on and so forth. Looks like a DGA once again. And in this particular case, I kept continuing through, and sure enough, I found in this same series of communications with this external domains, I found some text records being supplied. Now again, the text record capability of DNS exists for a reason. That said, it isn't used a lot. And notice the text in there, that smells to me like something encoded. And that's really the heart of tunneling right there. This is indeed what we're looking at is tunneled traffic between a host that's running DNSCAT and an external malicious C2 server. So we had size anomalies there, we had content anomalies there, and then finally, I want to give us an example of another one. So I've pivoted back to some of the malicious PowerShell Empire stuff, and in particular, take a look at the response bytes column. Notice all of the response bytes there are 2115, right? 2,115 bytes in size. It is not common for a user doing activity, right, on a browser or things like that for the response to be all the same. Now, that being said, we have lots of instances where applications are interacting, right? They're using XML, they're using JSON, other protocols like that to exchange readable information. However, even in those instances, I find it's very rare for the sizing to be that uniform. And again, it's simply a human error on the part of the person who created this, that they didn't build some mechanisms in to do that. Indeed, if I go over to just the timing, here's the timestamps for the same series of examples, and notice they are 5 seconds apart. So all of them, right, 15, 22, 52, 47, 42, 37, 32, et cetera, right? So all of those have a time that's 5 seconds apart. Happens legitimately, but certainly much more happens maliciously in my experience. So what we did is we've given you kind of a really high-level overview of how to kind of theoretically go about doing threat hunting, and then hopefully take away some concrete examples. All of those ones I showed are very common malicious things that are often not flagged by our static detection. And so all of those would be, you know, if you're looking for something to start hunting with, those are all ones I would suggest probably worth some time. So the key here is we want to, in this case where I kind of walk through high level, I metaphorically was tagging those, right? And so then we want to circle back and run each of those anomalies to ground. Because even if it's not malicious, that's then something that we want to add to our repertoire of knowing that this is legitimate so that we can ignore it on subsequent hunts. And it's through that iteration we get better and better, right? Threat hunting is one of those things that the concepts are very straightforward. It's all about the practice, practice, practice. I can talk about it forever, and the only way any of us get good at it are by just going out and doing it. And that's really one of the key things I'd like to stress is there's just a ton of value in it. You don't have to start huge. I would just suggest set aside like 30 minutes a day or something like that. Even do something iteratively. You'll find that after a couple months of that, you get some really interesting results. And of course, ultimately what I've shared today is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so much to this area, but it is such an important area for us as organizations to use to really help our finding of malicious activity. So, and of course I already said that the process is often more valuable than the specific results. So with that, I think we will jump over to questions. And Drews, I believe you've been collecting questions.
Yes. So I'm going to sort of work my way back here. Some of them you actually ended up covering during the course of your conversation. When there was a couple of questions regarding what is C2, and you actually defined that as being command and control and went into a lot of detail. So if there are additional questions on that, please feel free to join the Q&A section of the user interface, and we can go into any detail. A question that just came up here is, because you're going through the logs and you saw that SSL was running over port 80, and the person wanted to know how was that determined? Was it through deep packet inspection, et cetera? I mean, I'll let you answer that, seeing as it's your show.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a capability within the Bricata sensors. Bro and Suricata both have the ability to identify protocols. That's really helpful because it certainly was common for different protocols to be run over non-standard ports, and by giving that analyst up front that data point that we've identified, this is actually SSL, and port 80 is what it's running on, that did a lot of my work for me because both Bro and Bricata have the ability to obviously not every single protocol that's possible out there, but the vast majority of protocols, they do a really good job of identifying.
Okay. We have a question from Jason, and this is actually more administrative than anything else. He wanted to know, as somebody who runs a threat organization, is there a rule of thumb behind how much time you spend during normal incident response versus threat hunting as a practice? Is this incorporated? How do you actually incorporate this into the normal everyday plans of how you run your organization?
Great question. Unfortunately, the answer, of course, is depends, right? It really depends on your level of resources, your level of maturity of your team. I wouldn't say that hunting is the first thing I would tackle. As always, I would suggest make sure you've got the basics first. Make sure you're doing a good job on the 101 stuff. Frankly, a lot of what the malicious threat actors do is rely on the fact that many of us are so busy trying to do the cool stuff that we often, it's easy for us to forget the simple stuff. So I would start with that to be sure, and then but I would suggest that at some point, if you're not maturing to the point where you are investing some amount of time in threat hunting, then you absolutely likely have unknown malicious activity, which will bite you, right? If we look at 2017, the threat actors that were responsible for the breaches in 2017 were all successful, not because those organizations were doing a terrible job, but because the mid-level adversaries and up, who are responsible for the majority of the successful breaches, they are very, very good at evading our simple stuff, our static preventative stuff. It's really easy for us to over-index on prevention technologies, and that's why platforms like Bricata, in my opinion, are so vital, is because we want a balance. We absolutely want to prevent as much as we can, but then we need detection and response. We need the ability to hunt if we're going to have a fleshed out program. How quickly we get to that is a function of resources and a bunch of other things like that. If we don't, however, get to hunting at some point, I would suggest that we're always going to be in a reactive. So from my perspective at this point, I think if we don't start carving out time for things like hunting, then we're always going to be doing fires. And these are the things that allow us to get ahead of the firefighting constantly.
Cool. Okay, there's a question. There's actually a couple of questions along this line, but we'll kind of jump around to some of them. Marvin asks, can you recap some of the products that you would recommend for being able to do this? And of course, my personal advertising portion of this being Bricata is we obviously help do that, but obviously we're not the be all end all of that. So I'm going to hand that off actually to the rest of that question to you, Tim.
Absolutely. So there's tons of tools with this. This is actually a fairly tool space. There's not. I have yet to find a single tool that can help with all of this. I would start with, what does your teams have expertise and skills in? So if you have a team that knows Elasticsearch and you have that available, or Splunk and you have that available, et cetera, those are great things. But as I alluded to earlier, it can often just be as simple as Excel, quite honestly, right? I tend to lean most heavily on IPython, and IPython Notebook, Jupyter Notebook. Those just are personal tools that I'm very comfortable with, I enjoy using, and have a lot of affinity for allowing me to parse and handle the data from many different ways. But by no means does that mean I think those are the best tools. It really comes down to, I would start with, what are the things that you want to analyze? You're going to need something for sorting and sifting the tool. I know many hunters who use nothing more than grep at the end of the day, right? They'll go out and get the raw logs on a X environment, some sort of Linux variant of choice, and will literally use grep as their primary tool. Highlighters and text editors and things like that, again, can make really great tools for this. So you don't need something fancy for tools to start. I would start with whatever you're comfortable with. You need the ability to search. You're going to want the ability to do some filtering, and you're going to need the ability to to tag and highlight and a few things like that. Needs probably too strong a word, but those definitely would all be things to help facilitate.
Yeah, and of course it always helps to, when you have tools like grep, et cetera, it helps if you have a good source of data to be mining first. So you need to have both. Yeah. If
you don't have the right data, you've lost before you've begun.
Yeah, exactly. So there's been a couple of questions. I'm gonna combine some of these. There's a question here. Do you see a lot of reuse of existing exploits and vulnerabilities? Some other people asking about, in general, how does threat intelligence factor into this? I'm gonna make a brief statement, then I'll let you sort of bring it home, and that is, one of the aspects of what we're talking about here is threat hunting, and almost by definition, threat hunting is a bit of an active process. The assumption is that the threat intelligence isn't already out there. If the threat intelligence, if somebody is doing reuse of exploits, et cetera, and obviously there's going to be a fair amount of that. Those things are relatively easy to detect. You can have a snort rule. There's a number of different rules-based engines that can be used to identify known threats. What we're really trying to drill home here, and the uniqueness of what Tim is talking about, is threat hunting. Threat hunting assumes that there's stuff in your network already that has been missed by all of your detection mechanisms, and how do you find that? How do you find those things that have never been seen before, that there isn't existing threat intelligence for? So To that, I'm going to combine these into a couple of questions, and that is, where do you see the role of this in terms of traditional, alerting techniques, reuse of existing exploits and vulnerabilities, and where does this fit in terms of your entire strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're exactly right, Truce. The purpose of this is very complementary to your detection platform, right? The detection platform is a key piece, and when you really peel back the hood and look at the signatures, mostly what they're doing is looking for things like those exploits. If you think about the examples I gave today, those had nothing to do with exploitation. Those had to do with what does the activity look like regardless. Because what I'm really doing here is I'm thinking about and coming about it, what are the needs of the attacker, right? Because the malware and the exploits and all of that is going to continue to refine. Certainly they reuse tons of that, to be sure, but most of the reuse, as Drew said, you mentioned, right, is going to be detected by our static. The actors that are good at this are using other techniques that aren't being captured by those. And ultimately then this becomes incredibly complementary, right? That's why I called out earlier, one of my outputs from my threat hunt is, okay, here's all the interesting things we found. How do we build ongoing detection so that we can keep hunting for new things, right? And so that's why I focused on content anomalies and stuff like that. Those are things that are much more difficult for our adversaries to evade because at the end of the day, there's only so many ways to communicate in our environments. And most of our environments, this is certainly assuming that we're doing good general housekeeping, right? If we're not, then hunting is definitely not the right priority. So that's how I would characterize it. Certainly under the intel question kind of component, the better we understand the adversaries, the better at hunting we get. But I would not hunt because I don't yet not have understanding of adversaries, because the hunting will actually help me gain much deeper hunting of adversaries, which in turn makes me a better hunter. But the more intel we have, the better we can hunt, to be sure.
So we have a question from Rob. He's asking, are there any books that you can recommend for threat hunting? So I'll let you kick that one off.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of great resources on threat hunting. I would always recommend David Bianco's blog. He's really, he's famous for the Pyramid of Pain and several other kind of core concepts that have become a lot of the foundation of hunting. I would also, I just contributed to a book that's free, Huntopedia. They were just recently acquired by Squirrel, put it out, a resource put out by Squirrel, which was recently acquired by Amazon, so they're part of the Amazon family. They offer it for free. It's a free PDF download. It's got tons of Rob Lee, Richard Baitlake, David Bianco, Tyler Hudak, on and on and on. Some of just the folks who are regarded as the best cyber hunters out there. And basically we all just contributed a chapter on different aspects of hunting, and it's really good read. That's, again, a free resource, but certainly if you go to your O'Reilly's and any of those, there's lots of good, great resources today on hunting.
And I'll actually steal a little bit of additional thunder. I have a slide. There's a couple of slides in the future. That there is a very good show that's happening in September by the SANS Institute, all about threat hunting and incident response. It's occurring in New Orleans. So if you want a good opportunity to go to New Orleans and learn some things, definitely sign up for that. We're a sponsor of that event. There's also, if you're interested in more, there's a couple of links that we can recommend. One is threathunting.net, where it's basically a lot of the content is there in a GitHub format, but it's basically just good workflows to take a look at. etc. So there's a number of good resources. In terms of books, one of the problems with this as a technology is it's very fast moving, and
Yes,
typically
that's
when
right.
you have when you have books, they're going to cover what was really important a year ago. So definitely to keep up with this type of thing, read the blogs, read the the groups, etc. Those things have a tendency of being a little bit more current and with information that is more timely than some of these others. We have another question here from Jared. He says, what type of interactions do you suggest for threat hunters and the local red teams? How do they work together?
Oh,
and,
yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so if you've got a red team, they are a phenomenal partner for your threat hunters. In particular, they're going to bring to the table a deep understanding of a lot of the tools that are involved. They can demonstrate the tools, run the tools for the threat hunters, so the threat hunters can examine the systems to determine what sort of artifacts are left behind when those tools are run. Really a good way to partner. They are also a great partner during the hunt because they're so practiced thinking like the adversary. They might bring some ideas on where to hunt in terms of data sources and stuff that might not occur to our blue team folks, right, who are used to primarily working on the defense side of the table.
Cool. Okay, we're actually a little bit over here, but this is really phenomenal information. So I'd just like to conclude here saying, we're Bricata. We help simplify network threat hunting. Basically, a lot of the tools that you saw Tim use today, basically was our product. We incorporate the Bro engine in terms of extracting metadata, and we do try to incorporate a lot of that data, a lot of that information, and a lot of these practices into our core product, and that fits on top of a modern IDS platform. IDPS platform. So we're able to detect all the normal known threats that you are familiar with getting out of your IDPS, but then extend that with this additional metadata that allows you to hunt down and identify threats that aren't necessarily known or are not going to be caught by standard types of detection. And again, we try to simplify that using an intuitive user experience that really helps you get to the information that you need to as quickly as possible. So that's the extent of the advertising portion of this product. And again, we talked a little bit about some of the additional resources that are out there that you might want to go out and check out. One other thing is we will be following this up with an email that will allow you to click through and get to a white paper that we just developed regarding network threat hunting as well. So that's also a very good resource. Highly recommend following that up afterwards. We'll be sending that link out very shortly. It's also available on our website. So come visit us at www.bricata.com. This presentation is being recorded, and it will also be up on our website following basically tomorrow at the latest. So if you found this to be valuable, go ahead and send a link to this out to any friends who might find this interesting as well. So again, really like to thank Tim for spending his time with us today. I think that this was very valuable, and thank you to everybody who's left in the audience. We really appreciate your coming and sharing your time with us. Thank you very much.